Bill Salus, just such a great man of God, great testimony, and just gracious. I think I've mentioned before when I've had him on the program that when we first met him, it was at Orlando, the Prophecy Watchers Summit last year. And, he was one of those guys that I was really nervous about and in awe of, because he's the kind of guy that I've followed for years, but never met. And so I went up to him, but he was so gracious. He just loved my family. You want to get to a guy's heart, love his family. And he just spent time talking to us, cared. And so then we've worked together in a couple of other conferences. And of course, he's been on the program, but he graciously agreed tonight to come on the show. He is he really has his finger on the pulse of Israel and the wars that are happening and the things that are leading up ultimately to the return of the Lord. So, Bill, I'll let you say a word of welcome, and then if you guys have questions, if you want to start raising your hand and lining up, we'll bring you on. But Bill, take it away.
All right, thanks, JB, for having me on your program. It's an honor to be in with your premier group. I'm sure this is the elite group here that has the tough questions that they want to get on their minds that they want to get answered about Bible prophecy. So I'm real excited about it. I've been looking forward to this session.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I don't know how elite they are, but I do know that I have a pretty good control, because if they say something I don't like, I'll just cancel their subscription, So I have the ultimate weapon here, but awesome. Okay, well, we want to maximize the time. It's 5:14 here in Colorado. Let's go first to Matt Houck.
Hey.
Hey, Matt.
How you doing, JB? I appreciate the Zoom here, and your pace of ministry is incredible. I can't keep up with all the content. I'm just trying to digest the just the stuff you post on, what is it, the iTunes? Or no, the
YouTube.
All of our podcast channels. Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Matt, it's amazing what you can do with Chat GPT. It's really been helpful. So
that's the secret.
Yeah.
Anyway, Bill, appreciate you being on. Quick question. Have you talked to anybody who really didn't buy in at first to the next now near prophecies, but sort of changed their tune after the December 7th attack on Israel?
Well, there's plenty of people who didn't buy into that. And I've had to, of course, try to address their concerns, try to make sure that I feel still correct in what I teach in these areas. Some people, I've been so busy, I haven't really had a chance to network with a lot of people. Since the October 7th massacre, I've been quite busy keeping up with all the emails and the video opportunities and things. But there are some people who have been a little skeptical, who are starting to wonder more and more about, well, maybe it's, a lot of these people tend to gravitate towards the next prophecy is going to be Ezekiel 38. They're starting to say, well, maybe that's not going to happen next. Maybe it is leaning towards Psalm 83, which is, I've written a book on that. Or the destruction of Damascus could happen, or maybe even the prophecy in Jeremiah chapter 49 dealing with the ancient territory of Elam. So I've heard some people come along those lines, leaning more toward being more receptive toward that and pushing Ezekiel 38 back down the timeline a little further now. And so to answer your question, I haven't gotten a lot of that, but there's been a little bit I've heard.
Yeah, and by the way, I should mention, I failed to do this. I'm a terrible host sometimes, but websites where they can reach you. Tell us where they can find you and find your books.
My website is prophecydepot.com, Prophecy Depot like HomeDepot.com. Of course, they're on Amazon, but we encourage you to go to our online bookstore at prophecydepot.com.
Yeah, prophecydepot.com. And I've signed up for your newsletter and enjoyed getting your periodic emails. And so I encourage folks to do that as well. And by the way, if you guys are looking at the screen, you might notice the name Bill Salus there on his square. That's not a typo. Tell us about the spelling of your name. I don't want people to think I mistyped your name.
Yeah, actually, that's my birth name with the H. If it's Norwegian, it's supposed to be Bill Salhus. Of course, when I was in high school, I got rid of the Salhus thing. That seemed a little too pronounced. So it was Salus. But when I became an author, we decided to take the H out because for two primary reasons. One is if people are trying to find me and searching under Salus, they would not think to put an S-A-L-H-U-S, they'd S-A-L-A-S or S-A-L-U-S. US or IS or something. So for easier identity to find me, but also for a little bit of anonymity, in case the terrorists are coming after me, they can have a little harder time finding me.
Yeah, that's a good point. I might have to take that into consideration. Yeah, it makes it harder for the terrorists to find you.
Like just take the S out of your name, just Hixon.
Yeah, there you go. That's the most common spelling, actually, Hixon with no S. And then plus I go by JB. I've been JB since I was just a boy in grade school, 5th grade, I think it was. And so, but that's all right. If they want to find us, they can find us. But if they try to come here, they'll find 357 of my friends ready to give them a hearty hello. So we'll see. All right, let's go to Stephen Hayes. Hey, Stephen.
Good evening. Thanks again, JB, for hosting us. And to Bill Salus, I appreciate you coming on. So I'll have a question for you. I know you've written a book on Psalm 83. I apologize, I haven't read it. I'll have to order that and look into it. But of course, it's a big debate as to whether Psalm 83 is just a lament psalm or it's actually describing an end times war. I know you think it's a war. I was wondering if you could, the points from Psalm 83 that leads you to conclude it's an end time war.
Absolutely. It kind of broke up, but I think I pretty much got the gist of your question.
I'm going to throw up the passage on the screen here so folks can kind of see the text.
Psalm 83 was written about 3,000 years ago by Asaph, who was a worship leader of King David, but we were also told he was a prophet. In 2 Chronicles 29:30, and also in 1 Chronicles 25 verse 2, we find out that his sons were also prophets, as was he. So he's a prophet in addition to a psalmist worship leader. He identifies a group of people that are a contemporary confederacy, not a chronological ordering of Israel's enemies, who want to come together and destroy the name of Israel, wipe the Jewish state off the map, so that the name of Israel can be remembered no more. They did show up in 1948, while some people like Amir Sarfati thinks that actually fulfilled the psalm. But for various reasons, I can try to point out here shortly that really did not fulfill it in my estimation. Basically, you have members in Psalm 83 that are listed, very, very specifically identified. So for instance, in this 10-member coalition, you have what's called the Tents of Edom. They're listed in a habitation condition. Tents of typically, biblically, represent either military encampments or refugee conditions. So we've got one of the members, the first member listed in the priority position is listed in the habitation condition, and the Edomites have ethnical representation in the Palestinians. So I think we're being identified here with the Palestinian refugees. We also have another member called the inhabitants of Tyre, listed in the habitation condition. And so, they're also, Assyria, it says, is helping the children of Lot. Assyria back then would involve Iraq and northern Syria. The children of Lot would be Jordan. So you have one of the members is actually coming alongside and helping another member in this confederacy. So we've got identified habitation conditions. We've got members helping other members. This is not just a chronological ordering or assortment of Israel's enemies. Also, we're told that the Psalm 83 verses 9 through 18, we're told Asaph petitions the Lord to deal with this confederacy in a military capacity. He uses examples in the book of Judges, chapters 4 through 8, talking about Gideon and the Midianites, who the Lord empowered Gideon to destroy 120,000 Midianites with the 300-man army. The Lord supernaturally intervened in that. He also talks about the Canaanites would oppress the Jews for 20 years. The Midianites would oppress the Jews for 7 years. And Gideon killed them, wiped them out. They no longer oppress the Jews. Of course, the Arabs today are still oppressing the Jews. That's why I don't believe it happened in 1948. The Canaanites oppressed the Jews for 20 years. And Deborah, the prophetess, had her general Barak go, and they took out the Canaanites, who then again, and they took out all of them, the leaders, the infantry, the princes, and etc. And again, the Canaanites, like the Midianites, never again oppressed the Jewish people. So we have a specific approach to the method that Asaph would like the Lord to deal with them. I've also find out the Israeli Defense Forces are listed in numerous biblical prophecies, peripheral prophecies, dealing with these various people, Ammon and Moab and Edomites and Assyria and things like that. So, in my Psalm 83 book and my new book called the Future War Prophecies book, I get into all these prophecies that show how they are peripheral. They're related to Psalm 83. Different details within the Psalm 83 is sort of the blanket of the prophecy. And these other camera angles of what's going on with Jordan. Israeli Defense Forces exist in fulfillment of Bible prophecy only to defeat the Arab enemies. There's numerous prophecies where they show up. They're not involved in Ezekiel 38 or 39 because God stops that supernaturally. They're not involved in the tribulation period because in the first half of the tribulation, they're living in a pseudo peace. They have the covenant confirmed by the Antichrist. They believe they're living at peace. And they can't even stop the Antichrist at the mid part of the tribulation from going into the temple and abominating it. In the second half of the tribulation, they're not fighting, they're fleeing for their lives. Even Jesus said to them in Matthew 24, verses 15, flee when you see the abomination of desolation at the mid part of the tribulation. So they're involved in wars that are pre-tribulation, not in Ezekiel 38, and not in the tribulation. They're certainly not fighting in the millennium. So we have to find a place for those prophecies to find fulfillment. And all the prophecies are involve the population involved in Psalm 83. So those are just a few of them. There's a video we have on YouTube called Why Psalm 83 is a Standalone Unfulfilled Prophecy. I get into about 9 minutes of video and arguments as to why it's a prophecy and not just a prayer of lament, or it's not been fulfilled and it's not part of Ezekiel 38. Ezekiel 38, you got different participants. Some people think it's part of Ezekiel 38. Ezekiel 38 is involving a 9-member coalition with Russia, Turkey, Iran, an outer ring of countries, share no common borders with Israel, never harbored an ancient hatred of Israel. Versus Psalm 83 has 10 members that share common borders with Israel, have harbored an ancient hatred of Israel. There's different battlefields. By the way, they form an inner ring of countries that share common borders with Israel. The Gog and Magog invasion, the Lord stops that supernaturally with an earthquake, fire and brimstone, flooding rains. Psalm 83, that's destroyed militarily. Different enemies, different defeats, different motives. Ezekiel 38, they want to take plunder and booty from Israel. Psalm 83 wants to destroy the nation of Israel and take the pastures of God for themselves as a possession. That's Psalm 83, verse 12. I believe they'd want another Arab state called Palestine. So they're not looking for a two-state solution. They're looking for a one-state solution, according to this prophecy, in my estimation.
Yeah, and Stephen, I would also add, when we call these psalms by their, type, like lament psalm or a messianic psalm or a royal psalm or imprecatory psalm, it's not like the Hebrew text, had some type of, notation there. This is just the attempt of scholars through the years to categorize them. They all share similar characteristics, and I think they're accurate. But the fact is, a single psalm might have multiple components, so they're not mutually exclusive. It could have some lament aspects and yet still be prophetic. Is that right from your perspective, Bill?
Yeah, I think it is an imprecatory prayer, but it is also a prophecy as well.
Right.
The specific event with lots of details incorporated in it.
Yeah. So, Stephen, any follow-up on that?
No, I appreciate that outline. Thank you.
All right, who is next? Okay, we got a chat. So, Bill, this question is: what are the country differences of the 1948 war and today's war in Israel, and what is the difference of the countries of Psalm 83? So, I guess they're asking for a comparison and contrast between the parties involved in 1948 versus Psalm 83.
Well, in 1948, if we look at a modern day map, they pretty much were the Psalm 83 countries. You had the Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia. You had Lebanon, Syria, Iraq. Of course, you had the Palestinians at that time. They were Arabs of Palestine. Now they're called Palestinian refugees. And they were both in the Gaza area as well as the West Bank area of today. So they were pretty much all those groups that are listed in Psalm 83. In contrast to compare what's going on right now, There's some fragile peace treaties with Egypt and Jordan, so they're not really involved in what's going on right now. However, I point out that those peace treaties will be voided out pretty soon due to biblical prophecies. It clearly show them in wars with Israel. And Jeremiah 49, verses 1 through 6, Israel wins a war against Jordan. Zephaniah 2, verses 8 and 9, when Israel wins a war against Jordan. That's a different camera angle on that. Isaiah 19, verses 1 through 18, appears to be Egypt and Israel in a war. I believe those would be part of Psalm 83. But what's going on presently right now is Iran's proxies are involved in what's going on with respects to Israel's conflict, especially the Hamas. And then you also have Hezbollah as a proxy of Iran. Now, of course, they're in Lebanon. Now, Hamas is in ancient Phoenicia, the Gaza. So Phoenicia is part of Psalm 83, but they're primarily being motivated by Iran's proxy war. Hezbollah to the north, that's in Lebanon. I believe that would be the inhabitants of Tyre in Psalm 83. Syria is going to be more involved here pretty soon. You can count on that with their chemical weapons. I'm thinking that might start to mushroom out pretty soon. They would be involved as a proxy of Iran. The Houthis are not really in Psalm 83, nor were they part of, they're down by Yemen. They were not part of 1948, but they are a proxy of Iran, and they're trying to choke off ships out of the Red Sea presently. And of course, Iran is not part of Psalm 83, but they could very well get involved in this fray. But they're enlisting the Psalm 83 countries to come against Israel. All those countries, Egypt and Jordan and Saudi Arabia, have sided with the Hamas. They believe it's Israel's occupation that is causing this problem. So although they're not really involved, I have this sort of layered out if you people want to hear how I think this is going to happen. I'm just going to lay it out in my 5-minute Reader's Digest version.
Yeah, please do.
I think what could happen is that Iran is exercising a multi-layered, multifaceted, multi-phased proxy war. If they go forward to phase one was the Hamas, and then the Houthis trying to choke off the Red Sea. I believe phase two could involve Hezbollah launching about 6,000 missiles a day into Israel. The first few days, Israel's prepared for that. Days-long blackouts, hundreds dead, thousands wounded. And then it would taper off to 1,500 to 2,000 missiles a day, effective missiles that hit their targets. I believe Syria could get involved with chemical weapons, which they used over 300 times in their Syrian revolution. If that happens, if that becomes phase two, and already we have conflicts going on, Israel is bombing Syria. They took out the Damascus airport recently. They killed 11 top-ranking Iranian Revolutionary Guard commanders recently in that blast. They've been bombing the Aleppo area in northern Syria. They've been in conflict with Hezbollah to the north. If this escalates, at this point it hasn't, but if it escalates where it really could, Israel will have to fight itself in a prison rules war, and they will take out, in my estimation, the city of Damascus and fulfill a prophecy in Isaiah chapter 17 that says that burden against Damascus will someday cease from being a city. It will be a ruinous heap. Isaiah 17:9 says that happens overnight. Happens by the children of Israel. This desolation is caused by the children of Israel. Isaiah 17:14 says that one night you see him, Damascus, and the masculine pronoun, but in the morning it is gone. That city is gone. It's reduced to rubble. Israel would take out a city. And when Israel takes out a city, because they have to, in that kind of a war, I think Israel's been able to sort of dictate the terms of this war so far with Hamas. But I think if Iran gets more involved with their proxies, they're going to try to attempt to dictate the terms of the war. And it's going to get in a position where Israel suffers many casualties. Isaiah 17:4-6 seems to show Israel taking a severe hit. It says, the glory of Jacob shall wane, the fatness of his flesh shall wax lean. And it talks about the analogy of Israel taking a hit, in my estimation. I think they take out a city as a result. When they take out a city and they're hit and they're suffered as a country, I think the other Arab states go, whoa, what if they try to take out Beirut? By the way, they bombed Beirut recently and killed a high-ranking leader of Hamas over there. Hezbollah is already a concern and threatening to major war from that. I think Amman Jordan's going to go, well, what about our capital? And they should be concerned because Amman Jordan goes next in Jeremiah chapter 49, 2, it says, there's alarm of war in Rabbah of the Ammonites. That's Amman Jordan. And Israel, it shall be a desolate mound, and Israel shall take possession of its inheritance, which Jordan is part of the promised land. So Amman Jordan's going down. That peace treaty with Jordan's not going to last. I think they're going to get, and there's also, what about Cairo? What about Mecca? I think the Arab countries are going to be concerned about their cities going down as well by Israel. Israel's hurt. I think they'll come together in the final rally and say, well, let's go take out Israel now. I think that would actually conclude Psalm 83. So I see layers. I see a proxy war with Iran, could also involve Iran, could involve Jeremiah 49 verses 34 through 39. Talks about a disaster that happens on the west coast of Elam, which is where Iran has all of its missile underground, most of its underground missile silos, well protected, portable rocket launchers, their underground air base, so hypersonic missiles are there. Iran is probably going to threaten to shut down the Strait of Hormuz if this thing grows heavier, and I think it could, into 2024. They're trying to choke off the Red Sea with the Houthis. They're probably going to have Hezbollah take out that gas rig, Kurdish gas rig. And of course, a lot of this is speculation, folks. I'm just going to rifle it off for you here. That's the Mediterranean interest Israel has in the Leviathan field over there. Hezbollah could easily take that out. The Shiite militias in Iraq claimed they were trying to attack it, but there's no credible observation of that. But Hezbollah could take it out. Iran has threatened to take out the Strait of Hormuz. That's why the U.S. is putting together a 22-member Red Sea coalition right now to avoid the Houthis from continuing to choke off ships into the Red Sea and the Strait of Hormuz to be shut down. If Iran shuts down the Strait of Hormuz, the U.S. coalition would have to take out that west coast of Iran to fight off all the missile defense systems and things that Iran could fire to try to protect shutting down the Strait of Hormuz. That prophecy talks about the Lord being fiercely angry with the leaders of Iran because they want to launch something lethal somewhere. He's not going to allow them to do that. He's going to break the bow at the foremost of their might. He says it will cause a great disaster because of his fierce anger. And at the time, it says it'll be so bad that all the indigenous population will have to flee like a humanitarian crisis into the nations of the world. It says there'll be no nations, but the outcasts of its ancient Elam, where the Edomites don't go. And it says when this happens, he will pursue them with the sword, and Iran will be dismayed in front of their enemies, plural. That means there has to be more than one enemy. Of course, Israel is an enemy. But right now, you got a U.S.-led coalition that could be involved in that. So I'm looking at that as a potential prophecy setting up right now. Isaiah 17, probably in that order, Isaiah 17, Jeremiah 49, and then Psalm 83. Then ultimately, Israel can dwell securely, tear down all the walls, rebuild their country. And those are prerequisite conditions for Ezekiel 38 to find fulfillment. So I'm sort of looking at days of prophecies coming forward, maybe even as soon as this year.
And which book it really outlines the kind of the circles, the inner circle and outer circle of the wars? I
would say the latest one, the easiest reading one, gives you the good cursory view of everything, would be the Future War Prophecies.
Okay.
Book and DVD, the Future War Prophecies.
All right, we're putting in the notes there, Brooke, is some of the things that he's mentioned, like a link to his website, Prophecy Depot, a link to the book on Amazon. But again, if you can get it from Prophecy Depot, that would be better. Jeff Bezos probably has enough money. And then Brooke will list to the name of the book that he just recommended. Let's go. We'll come back to the next chat question in a moment from Gary and Miranda. Hey, guys. But let's go to a hand raise here. Let's go to Tomball, Texas.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, so this is a question that came from a Jewish friend of mine years ago. He said that because the 10 northern tribes of Israel were scattered under the Assyrians, never to be heard from again, and I guess that's what we call the 10 lost tribes, and the 2 southern tribes of Judah and Benjamin are the ones that went back to rebuild Jerusalem, that to claim to be a Jew today, you must claim to be either a member of the tribe of Judah or Benjamin. Does that make sense, or what do you think about that? Is that a fair question?
I don't think the 10 lost tribes are lost anymore, personally. I think that Israel, we find in Ezekiel 37 and Isaiah 11, we find that a time would come where they would be united, Ephraim and the northern kingdom, and Judah and the southern kingdom. I think we find Isaiah 11 tells us that happens in the second time that we regathered out of the nations. I believe that second time started to happen in 1948. Ezekiel 37 talks about an analogy with the 2 sticks being merged together.
Good, thank you. So yeah, you cleared it up. That's a good answer.
Okay, so let's go back as promised to Gary and Miranda. It says, can you give your perspective on Revelation 13? And I'll pull that up in a moment. The first 10 verses, which of course they're talking about the Antichrist, And when you would put that in the Bible prophecy timeline, specifically verses 7 and 8, when Antichrist is granted permission to make war with the saints and given authority over every tribe, tongue, and nation.
I believe that the way I would look at the book of Revelation chronologically in order, I would look at Revelation 17, Revelation 13, and Revelation 18. Revelation 17 talks about the ecclesiastical Babylon, the whore of Babylon, the harlot world religion, who I personally think is going to be spearheaded by Roman Catholicism. Around the mid part of the tribulation, after she's overextended her usefulness, she's very important to the Antichrist, who's on the scene at that time, because she rides the beast, he carries her to her heights, and she's useful in establishing a world governance at that point, ecclesiastically. But after the 10 kings come on the scene and they get in cahoots with the Antichrist, we're told in Revelation 17:16 that they desolate the harlot and they confiscate her wealth and they give it all to the Antichrist, who puts it into his coffer. And then you go to Revelation chapter 13, around the mid part of the tribulation. There's been a war in heaven. Satan and his fallen angels are cast down to the earth. Woe to the heavens and earth, because Satan knows his time is short. The Antichrist gets a mortal head wound around that time, and he gets resurrected. It looks like a real resurrection to the onlookers, who say, who can now stand against this guy? And they start to worship and follow him. And that's when I believe he starts his escapades. I think that's when he actually goes into Jerusalem and he goes to abominate the temple. I think you find Revelation chapter 14 talks about that. He starts to lay siege on Judah and Jerusalem in that area. And then you get into Revelation 18, where he's got his commercial Babylon. He sets up his headquarters. Some people think that's literal Babylon, Iraq. Some people think that's America. I personally think it's Rome. I think he just takes over in Rome, where the Vatican was. And I've written about that extensively in my book called the Next Prophecies book. I get into all that stuff and break that down. But I say that's the mid part of the tribulation, and that's when he starts his campaign to do the mark of the beast, that sort of thing, with the false prophet. He picks up that hitchhiker around that time. So basically, I see mid part of the trib.
Okay. And does that answer your question, Gary and Miranda? All right. Let's see here. Okay, so we're going to go to a couple more chat questions before we go to another hand raising. This is from Matt. Is that right? Is that the next one, Brooke? Okay. Hey, Matt. It says, Bill, based on current events, relationships between Russia, Iran, Turkey, the Ezekiel 38 folks, where do you think we are on the timeline concerning the rapture? That's just a really clever way, Matt, of asking, when's the rapture going to happen? Nice try, but we see through that in a second. Where do you think we are, Bill, in the timeline?
Well, with the rapture?
Yeah.
Well, Hal Lindsey got faulted for, around 1970s for talking about the rapture being that much more imminent. Of course, now we're 50 some years closer. I won't put a date on it. I'm pre-trib, though. I don't buy post toasties.
Yes. So to press you on that a little bit, do you feel like, let me tell you how I feel. I feel like with everything happening, the geopolitical positioning, all the wars that you've talked about, I just feel like we're probably living in the generation of the rapture. I know others have said that, but there are some key factors today in this weird world in which we live, with transhumanism, the technocracy, AI, one world currency, globalism, a lot of things today that are just absolute dead ringers for what we read about in the tribulation. So I've gone on record that I really think we are in the terminal generation. Obviously it's speculation. I don't have any special revelation here, but how do you feel about that?
I agree with you on that. I think all these signs are converging. It used to be the big super sign was the rebirth of Israel in 1948, and then it started being the super sign is all the end time signs are converging. So I think we're really deep onto the end times line. Basically, my perspective, the people ask me, is it going to be before Psalm 83 or after Psalm 83? Is it going to be before Ezekiel 38 or after Ezekiel 38? And I'll give you my best thought on those questions in a moment. But let me share a dream with you, and you guys tell me what you think about this. Now, it's a dream. I could have had bad pizza, but I'll share it with you. I was sleeping, and all of a sudden I started to elevate in my dream. And I'm going, my first thought comes to my mind is like, I'm going to hit the roof. And I got a little concerned. All of a sudden, bam, in a second, I was through the roof. And I'm still going up, ascending upwards. And then my second thought was, I'm being raptured right now. I started thinking I should look around as I'm going toward the cloud. I see my cloud. I look around, and there's some sparse clouds around the horizon with the family over here and a guy over here and a girl over here. I thought to myself, I said, wow, the road that leads to everlasting life is very narrow. Wow. I mean, there's not, I thought this would be standing room only.
Mm.
What I saw was not very many people going up. Now, whether that means I'm going to be raptured in my generation or what, I like to think so. I'm 70 years old now. My health is failing a little bit, but I do think that this is a generation. I agree with you. Now, will this happen before Psalm 83 or before Ezekiel 38 or during or whatever? Because I believe both those prophecies are pre-tribulation, as I do the rapture, I believe is pre-tribulation. So I'm going to give you my guess, and this all it is conjecture. I think we could be here for Psalm 83. I think we will be gone before Ezekiel 38. And I do put reasons for that in my Psalm 83 book. But I do think it's Psalm 83, perhaps rapture, and then Ezekiel 38.
Yeah, and so just to clarify, these events could be and are, we believe, pre-tribulational, but that doesn't necessarily mean they have to be pre-rapture, right?
Right. The rapture could happen on before, during, or after Psalm 83, before, during, or after Ezekiel 38, but
Yep.
before the tribulation.
Right. Okay. Awesome. All right, let's go to my good friend John. So John, if you'll unmute yourself there. Look at that hat, man. That you must have paid a fortune for that thing. That's a pretty powerful hat.
I want one of those.
It was worth every penny. Brooke, I want to thank you for helping me get on here tonight. It's my first time. But Bill, my question for you is I've seen photos, you know, how tiny Israel is, the state of New Jersey, but then the land that was actually allotted to Israel by God is so much bigger. Because also I think in Ezekiel 38 or 39, wherever it is, where Israel will be in peace and security, will they get all that land first? You know, what was given to them originally by God?
Well, I would break it down this way. After Psalm 83, I believe Israel is going to take over incrementally all of Jordan. And there's some passages like in Jeremiah chapter 49 and elsewhere that talk about them taking over northern and central Jordan. I think you find in Ezekiel 25, they'll actually probably take over southern Jordan, which is ancient Edom. I think they'll take over parts of northeastern Egypt area, because in Isaiah 19, verses 18, we find out that 5 cities in Egypt speak the language of Canaan, which is Hebrew. But that's all incremental gains. And when Israel wins war, they have a pattern historically as well as in modern history of annexing territory because they're the victor. It increases the defensibility of their borders, and they realize that's land within the metes and the bounds of the promised land, which is between, in Genesis 15, the river of Egypt, probably the Euphrates. Of course, is all the way through the modern day Euphrates, which would be, the Nile in Egypt, to the Euphrates in Egypt, in Syria and Iraq. They will not get all that land, though, until the Messiah comes in that land in the Messianic kingdom.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Excellent question. And thanks for the free publicity there, John. We appreciate
Oh, well, let me just tell you something, JB. My nickname is going to be John Billboard.
it.
Yeah, 'cause I got the matching cap, the sweater, Worldview Matters,
Yep.
Standing for the Truth. I'm hoping people ask questions, but it's so spiritually dead up here, they have no idea.
Yeah, John's up in upstate New York. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So
And I'm thinking about relocating to Colorado.
come on, we'd love to have you down here in Colorado. It's not it's only slightly better than New York, but that's all right. Baby steps, right?
Well, I'm up in the mountains. I'm not in the city no more.
That's true. Good point.
I'm originally from the Bronx.
Okay. From the Bronx, we would never have been able to tell from your accent. But go Yankees. I grew up rooting for the Yankees. My dad worked in Manhattan when I was in grade school and junior high school, and so I was a Yankees fan back in the day. But all
Smart
right,
man.
well, Well, thanks, John. Let's go back to chat first, and then we'll go up here to oh, great, Randy. All right, but let's go to Carol first. Carol has a question here. I guess since we're, this is my paraphrasing of her question. Since we're predicting the date of the rapture, she wants us to play pin the tail on the false prophet as well. So, who do you think the Pope could be the false prophet? Is her question.
Well, I think the better way to ask that question is, do I think a pope? This particular pope is so old, I don't think he's going to make it to be a candidate for that.
Okay.
I don't personally think a pope will be either a Jew or a Catholic pope. Excuse me, false prophet.
Right.
I think the false prophet will be a Jew or a pope. The reason I don't think he'll be a pope is because I believe that the harlot world religion is spearheaded by Roman Catholicism. And when it gets desolated, the Pope, if he is not killed or sent into exile, would be hard-pressed to say, hey, the Antichrist who's now going to say, worship me, I'm above all that's called God. I don't think the Pope's going to go, hey, we had it wrong. We weren't the one true church. We need to worship this guy now who just desolated our whole religion. I don't think the Pope's a likely candidate for that, nor do I think the Antichrist or the Pope will be a Jew, because the end times goal of the Antichrist and Satan is to kill every Jew, so that no Jew can say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, which is a mandate established by Jesus in Matthew 23 for the return of Jesus Christ in the second coming. And the faithful remnant will do that. And when they're housed in hiding in Petra, Jordan, they'll say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord at the end of the Armageddon campaign. But I don't think a Jew or a Pope or a false prophet would be a Antichrist, or false prophet would be a Jew, primarily for that reason. Matter of fact, people like Dr. Arnold Fruchtenbaum and myself would say that the Jews aren't even going to be offered the mark of the beast, because all they're going to be offered is persecution and genocidal attempts by the Antichrist.
Yeah, I mean, far be it from me to disagree with Arnie or Bill Salus, but I speculated in my latest book that the false prophet would be a Jew, and my rationale is his primary goal is to get people to worship the false Christ, the Antichrist, his boss. And I think and this of course is in the second half of the tribulation, I think one way that he will use his deception that Jesus warned the nation of Israel about is by getting one of their own to say, come on, guys, this is the king. This is the long-awaited Messiah. Jump on board. But the fact is there's no clear, emphatic biblical text that tells us the nationality of either the Antichrist or the false prophet. I agree with you that the Pope is not likely to be the Antichrist, and I definitely, or a Pope, and I definitely don't think the Antichrist will be Jewish. I know there's a contingent of Bible prophecy teachers out there that think he is Jewish, but I definitely think you can prove that that's not the case. So, but yeah, good stuff. Great questions. All right, let's go here to Grandpa Randy. Hey, brother.
Well, Mr. Salus, this is a privilege. I have followed you for so many years. I tell you what, I followed you longer than my kids have been alive. So, got a couple of questions for you real quick. I've been watching you, your books, everybody else's for 48 years, pretty much. Got a couple of questions here real quick for you. Last night, the Russians and the Turks kind of got into a little battle, with the Russians flying jet fighters over Turkey today. I don't know if that's going to be blowing into something or not, but I also noted that Russia is now erecting, what do I want to call, outposts in the Golan Heights and in the Syrian border area. Now, my question is, how long do you think it'll be between the Psalm 83 war and the Gog Magog war? How much of a time lapse are you looking at?
That's a really good question and a tough question. I think there'll be a little bit of time, because I think in the buildup to Psalm 83, I think Isaiah 17 happens and Israel takes a hit, and they've suffered quite a bit. And I think after Psalm 83, they tear down the walls that are got all around the country and the partition wall inside of the country, and invite more aliyah as Jews continue to feel anti-Semitism and persecution in the world. They'll start to go over there. They'll see opportunity. They'll feel safer. And I think there'll be an influx of Aliyah going pretty quickly after Psalm 83 over there to rescue the nation, if you will. However, I don't think it'll be too long for that to happen, maybe a couple of years, because I think Russia's going to also want to harness that hatred of the Muslims against the Israeli Defense Forces and the Jews, who have just pretty much taken out all the core elements of Islam, 600 some thousand, whatever. More than that, I don't know how many Arabs there are Muslims over there, but the other Muslim countries that are outer ring of countries in Ezekiel 38, and Russia's going to want to harness that hatred and bring them against Israel. And I think at that point, it'll probably be maybe a couple of years, maybe, be my guess.
Okay, a follow-up. I noticed that Putin is still basically in the same area he was a year ago as far as his fighting in the Ukraine. Do you think he wants to move through the Ukraine into the Baltics or into Poland or something? Or do you think he will be satisfied when he gets everything under his power all the way out to Odessa, so that he has his warm sea ports, so that he can move down to Turkey when he's ready? Or is he going to go over to Moldova and down through Bulgaria and Romania? What do you think?
You know, I'm probably not that qualified to answer that question. I don't think he's doing very well at all at this point. I mean, the headline came out and said recently, if I got it correct, that he's counting a loss of almost 500,000 troops, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that. Search it. So, but the point is, it's like, he's having a big trouble. Matter of fact, I think at some point Russia finds itself a lot weaker than it is right now, and that's why they need such a big coalition to come against Israel, with all its Turkey and Iran and the North African countries and the breakaway republics of the Soviet Union. So, I mean, I don't know how well he's going to do. I don't know if he's really going to take over Ukraine at this point, and if he does, I don't know if he's going to have the manpower to even go much further.
So I would think he would be satisfied with that southern area, because then his military could move at will out into the Mediterranean, and then in the future he could be a threat to Israel coming in the Mediterranean to their west coast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and Randy, stand by, because I want to ask a follow-up for you as well, or give you a chance to answer it after Bill does. But I think Randy's point is, what he's getting at is, if Russia, goes no further and until they get to the point where they have a clear pathway to the south, that could be an indication of the lead up to Gog and Magog and the northern invasion. Whereas if they keep going, then it could indicate that their primary focus was just completely destroying Ukraine, and maybe not necessarily in the immediacy of the Gog Magog. But back to your comments about Russia, Bill. You get mixed reports in the mainstream media, no surprise there, but it seems to me that Russia should have easily set aside Ukraine long before now. And why is it, do you think, that this battle is raging on, given the conventional thought is that Russia should have dispatched with Ukraine much more quickly? And then after Bill, Randy, I'd love to get your take on that.
Well, I think it was fairly poorly executed. I think the West got involved and helped Ukraine, quite a bit with some weapons and missiles. I just don't think he was calculated as well as he could have, and therefore, unless he's going to bring out the heavy firepower, maybe a nuclear weapon, I think he's going to find himself in a real tug of war for even a longer period of time.
Okay, and Bill, in case, if you may not know, Randy is a regular guest on our program every Wednesday. We do a show called World Events Update, and we call him Grandpa Randy. That's his new nickname. But anyway, he's got lots of sources and well connected with different people in different military units. But he's also well versed in Bible prophecy. As he said, he's followed you and guys like you for many years. So, Randy, how would you answer my last question?
Well, in preparation for tonight, I got a hold of some of my sources. Their opinion is right now, Russia is waiting for North Korea, Iran, and China to be able to respond simultaneously. Now, China will probably hold back more than the others, but they're thinking that North Korea could be the linchpin to get things going. Then Russia and Iran would follow in step. What they're looking at is a simultaneous effect of maybe being in a position where they could take out our Navy assets in one attack over 1 or 2 days. Our ships are so close to the borders that basically they're in range of all the shorter ship missiles, as well as, so the Russians have their aircraft with the Kinzhal missiles and everything flying not too far away. The Turks have basically gotten into the area where they have moved some of their Navy assets into the Mediterranean. And I noticed today that Iran started moving their Navy into the Persian Gulf. Now, it would make sense if they do this simultaneously, because that would be an onslaught that we could not prevent, we could not defend against. And I was thinking, these guys militarily are thinking this. They're Christians, but they don't necessarily put a biblical perspective to it. But what are your thoughts? I mean, I don't see how we are mentioned at all in the Gog Magog war. I've never been able to put us in there, no matter what I read or how many sources I check. If the United States Navy was taken out in a Pearl Harbor or a sudden strike, that would pretty much prevent us from having any force forward other than the continental United States and what little bit we have in Europe. Do you think that they're thinking simultaneously, or what are your thoughts?
Me or JB?
You, Bill.
Okay. Well, two things. Iran and America. Iran, I don't see them getting too involved in a world scenario that you just mentioned. I mean, their fate is prophetically sealed. They're going to have a disaster in Jeremiah chapter 49, verses 34 through 39. That doesn't totally dismantle the whole nation, because they live again to fight as under the banner of Persia in Ezekiel chapter 38:5. So they've got
Right.
double trouble in the end times of dual prophecy. I think Iran's going to get himself into a real problem as it tries to take out the Strait of Hormuz and get more involved in its proxy war with Israel. Whether they ratchet up the next phases soon, or whether it's down the road, a year or two down the road, it appears that they're not going to let all their proxies go down like Hamas is going down. At some point, they're going to have to call on them with a much more heavy firepower with Hezbollah and Syria, etc. As far as America and Ezekiel 38, I have in my Future War Prophecies book, I think it's there, and also on a DVD I did with Prophecy Watchers called, actually the DVD I did it with was with Tom Hughes, called the Pre-Tribulation Prophecies. I give the biblical, geographical, archaeological, historical reasons why America is probably the young lions of Tarshish being the UK, and the young lions being the United States. I think the arguments are pretty sound that America is involved on the sidelines barking as a protester, not fighting with Israel, fortunately not fighting against Israel. But something probably happens to America to put itself in a position as a sideline protester. Obviously, you look at the UK right now, they really couldn't fight Russia in that big of a coalition. But what happens to America? Why all of a sudden are we barking on the sidelines, if indeed that's us? I see a compromise on our superpower status between now and that time.
Yeah, I think regardless of whether they're the young lions or not, I think we definitely see from the Luciferian perspective, which is what I've been studying for so long, their desire to destroy America and get it out of the way so they can, usher in their goals and their one world system. So, yeah, one thing I know for sure, based on, just sort of in response to what Randy and Bill have been talking about, is it's never about what it's about. So, we can sit back and try to speculate on why the Russia-Ukraine conflict has gone the way it has. But there's more powerful forces at play here that have an agenda that we may not have even contemplated. So,
Yes.
anyone else have a question either in the chat or raise your hand if you'd like to ask Bill a question? All right, go back to Stephen here.
Yeah, thanks for a second chance.
Oh,
This one's for JB, and Bill. This is one I've been wanting to ask you, JB, but I'd love to hear both your opinions. So the older dispensationalists seem to view Daniel's fourth kingdom as Rome, and in its latter days manifestation as a revived Roman Empire. It seems like a lot of people these days are turning it into a global confederation. There are going to be these 10 global regions. And so my question is, what's your take on this? Is the kingdom of Antichrist revived Roman Empire, by which I would mean European-centric, or is it this global confederacy?
So I'll jump in first, and then Bill, you can kind of clean up my mess. I would say it's a both and. I think we know the ultimate goal that Satan has, regardless of how he gets there prophetically, is to take over the whole world. He wants this kingdom as his own, and so I think that's the spirit of the Antichrist that is alive and well in the globalist agenda, the World Economic Forum and all of those groups, CFR, Trilateral Commission, all of the folks that, in America anyway, have been working hand in puppet with the Luciferians since the early 20th century to try to bring America to its knees so that it has to beg to become part of a globalist agenda. I think, I'm a traditional dispensationalist, so I think the interpretation of Daniel that we've always had is accurate. I think there is going to be a revived Roman Empire that's going to have, 5 Eastern nations, 5 Western nations. But I think as prophecy goes on and we get close to the return of Christ, we're going to see that, expand beyond just a regional Roman Empire. I think it'll accomplish what the first Roman Empire sought but never did accomplish, and that is, conquering the whole globe. So I think it's kind of both, and it's definitely a revival of the Roman Empire. There'll be 10 nations that are playing a key role. But you're right. I mean, Satan's earthly co-conspirators, and I've talked about this in some of my presentations, definitely have mapped out a global region, regional map that has 10 designations, and they're not all tied back into the original Roman Empire. So I think it's kind of a both and. However we get there, we're headed towards a one world system that will be, for a period of time, led by the unholy trinity of Satan, the Antichrist, and false prophet. Bill, your thoughts?
I believe it is a revived Roman Empire. I hold to that traditional view. I do think there'll be he's going to have a global grip. I think there'll probably be actually 10 regions established throughout the world, maybe like the Club of Rome tried to do several decades back. Are they 10 kings within his revived Roman Empire, or are they 10 kings scattered about? That's more difficult to understand, but I think it's going to be a global grip. I think he's going to have 10 regions that's going to control over the world that's in chaos at that point in time. And he's going to feel like he can harness that together with having these 10 strategic leaders over these regions. But I do think it's a revived Roman Empire.
Yeah, I mean, it is hard to get your hands around. I've been studying Revelation 17 for quite some time, and particularly in the last few months. And it's just hard to figure out the relationship between, the 10 toes and the 10 horns and the 10 nations and how they all fit. But I like the way you said it there. It's a global grip. But who's to say, Stephen, that maybe you've got 10 primary nations in the revived Roman Empire, but they exert influence over these 10 other regional leaders. I mean, it's hard to say. I think there's some good work out there on that from some prophecy experts that have really kind of made that their focus. I tend to think more in terms of the big picture, and while it's fun to get down into the weeds a little bit on that, the bottom line is Satan is hard at work right now with his earthly co-conspirators, rapidly trying to bring us to a point of globalism. And in the same way that, Bill has talked about, you have to have some flexibility on the exact timing relative to the start of the tribulation, where the rapture fits in here with all these end times wars. I think the same thing is true for the one world system, or the New World Order, as they call it. We could already be in the New World Order prior to the rapture. I mean, the only thing the Bible says is that the Antichrist takes the helm of this one world system, which starts the clock ticking on Daniel's 70th week and the wrath of God. But there's nothing that would preclude the world already being in a one world government prior to that. And so that's kind of where my mind goes as I think about all the signs of the times that are happening now. Okay, let's go to, hey, Christy, how are you?
this is primarily for you, JB, with regard to the, so it's my understanding that the religion of Islam that, and correct me in your response if I'm wrong here, but it's my understanding that they want to eventually, they think that they need to push Islam on the entire world. They think they want everybody to become Muslim. So if that's correct, how does that play out with if the false prophet is going to, if the new world religion is going to be a combination of all the, you know, Buddhism, Hindu, Christianity, Judaism, is that going to be like a major problem for the Muslims? Is there going to be like a conflict there? Because they don't seem to like anything other than Islam.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true of a lot of, you know, violent religions. And again, I'll take a stab at this and then I'll let Bill clean up my mess. But you know, the Bible says the Antichrist is going to be one who denies the gods of his fathers. And so I've always taken that to mean that he's not going to be a leader of any one established religion. And I believe the only way that the Antichrist is going to be able to get a worldwide religious following is to adopt a pluralistic worldview, which is why I believe we see all the major world religions push, including Christianity, apostate Christianity, pushing towards a pluralistic mindset. You've got, you know, the Pope sharing the platform with imams, with, you know, evangelical pastors and, you know, Buddhists and so forth. And so I think that you're right. Islam, by its own writings, is wanting to conquer the world. But there was a time when that was true of Roman Catholicism. I mean, what were the Crusades all about and so forth? So, I mean, I think, you know, you've got a lot of competing factions, and it's not a nice, neat, monolithic system. But I think based on the biblical data, it seems clear to me that, you know, even though a lot of Bible prophecy teachers, and I've been at conference after conference where they have speakers that stand up and talk about Islam as the enemy. And to be sure, Islam is evil, and they're a real problem right now, especially for modern day Israel. But I don't see them as the end all, you know, final religious entity in the tribulation. I think it's going to be a pluralistic religion. Bill, your thoughts?
Yeah, presently they estimate about 1.8 billion Muslims in the world, but there are some serious Muslim wars that are coming forward, prophetically speaking. One is Psalm 83, 10 members that are predominantly all Muslims, sharing common borders with Israel, those countries, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, etc., Iraq. But then also you have an outer ring of countries in Ezekiel 38, apart from Russia, which are all predominantly Islamic as well. So even though there's about 1.8 billion Muslims in the world, after those two wars, the core parts of Islam in the Middle East and those areas are going to take out about 600 to 800 million that either be dead or imprisoned or exiled Muslims. And they're going to start to doubt and wonder how, if Allah is, I think that's how I put it. I think Allah is going to lose his Akbar. Allah Akbar means Allah is the greater God, right? Well, I don't think they're going to think that after these two major wars that are forthcoming.
Yeah, I think that's a very plausible scenario. All right, let's go to Grandpa Randy. Has something extremely profound that's going to change the world, I can tell.
I don't think so. Bill, this is only going to be your opinion, but do you believe that Putin has the pedigree to be Gog?
I do. I think what he showed us in the Ukraine was an evil plan, Ezekiel 38:10, to go into a people living peacefully and for great gain. Of course, you know, he says he wanted to insulate Russia from the West, but there was also the sort of the breadbasket of Europe goes through the Ukraine as well, you know, the large production of wheat and corn, etc. So I was watching that thinking, hey, this is sort of the precursor of what Ezekiel 38 is going to be. An evil leader from Russia is going to put an evil plan together, go against a peaceful people for plunder and booty. And it almost looks like this is going to be a stepping stone in that path.
Yeah, that's
Thank
a
you.
good point. Yep. All right. Any more questions? This has been some great questions tonight. Here, let's go to Carrie. All right. Carrie, your question? or Carrie
Hi.
Lynn.
Yes, thank you. Sorry if you've already discussed this. I just got home from work. So the question has to do with Civil War and your podcast that you did with Leo Hohmann last Monday. I found it really interesting how he discussed the arming of all of the illegal immigrants in the Civil War, and the fact that the government is buying up all of these military grade weapons and millions of rounds of ammunition, and potentially going to use them to arm the illegal immigrants to fight on one side of the Civil War. And so the question is, knowing that, what would be your advice for us and for any children we have that might be military age men or boys going forward, knowing that they've got millions of rounds of ammunition to supply this side? Would you recommend that we encourage our boys to fight on the offense, or to just defend ourselves as necessary but conserve ammunition? Or I'm just not sure what advice to give our boys if something like this were to break out.
Yeah, Carrie Lynn, I thought that was a fascinating observation that Leo made as well. And he said, admittedly, it's just speculation, but it kind of explained a lot of why we've got all these stockpiling of weapons by government, offices that otherwise have no need to be armed. It's the militarization of the Small Business Administration, that kind of a thing. First of all, I think there's no easy answer to that, because the circumstances could change, and who knows what the circumstances will be. But if I'm right that we are rapidly hurtling towards the dismantling and destruction of this country, then I would say, and I have two military age young men in my family too, two sons. My personal opinion would be keep them out of it at all costs, because I don't think it would be a just cause. I think it would be the military today is not what it was back in the Greatest Generation and back in times gone by. But that's assuming that indeed, we get involved in some type of a ill-fated globalist war and so forth. If the Lord tarries is coming and our country is still limping along, and we face regional attacks, because again, the whole globalist agenda is not monolithic, meaning it's not just following an easy script that's this happens, then this happens, then this happens. There are a lot of variables, a lot of competing agendas. You've got fallen people running things. You've got warring factions. You've got different outposts of the New World Order. Xi thinks he might take over with China. Putin might think he's going to take over. So it's not all that well organized. Satan, of course, is the author of confusion. So depending on what happens, there may be a need for people to defend our country like we have for 247 years. But my best guess would be this thing is, they've just been dismantling our military. And by the way, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that if Biden were to institute a draft, that women would be involved in that. So it's not just our young men, it could be our young women. But depending on how it plays out, the military today is no place that I would want any of my children to be a part of. They shoot them up with chemicals. They train them with joysticks and computer screens. It's a devastating thing. Not to say there are not great, patriotic, godly, courageous men and women serving in the armed forces. There absolutely are. I know some of them, and I come from a family of very devoted, faithful servicemen. So, but I just feel like it's not your father's military like it used to be. And so I would really, my advice would be most likely do what you can to keep them away from that. But that comes with a big caveat of, it depends on how it all unfolds. So,
Thank you.
Bill, would you like to add anything to that?
No, I think you're right. I'd be very cautious of that. We have to defend ourselves. And you look what's going on in Israel right now. their sales of weapons and guns are up dramatically since the Hamas massacre. Citizens are arming themselves to be protected from the next attempt on their lives over there. So I think it's important for us to defend ourselves, but again, getting involved in the military at this point in time, I would try to avoid that if at all possible.
Yeah, and it's, to me, I don't understand what our military is doing right now. Randy and I talked about this on a recent show because some of the carriers were coming back to the mainland, and I speculated then, I wonder if that's because they know something we don't. But it seems like with as much turmoil as there is in the world today, man, I would circle the wagons. I would bring those back to defend the homeland, which is, after all, what our military is supposed to do. We're not supposed to have 200 some odd military bases all throughout the world. I mean, we're basically an island nation with two neighbors, both of whom are allies and friends. I mean, we ought to be able to see the enemy coming a mile away. I just don't see and never have understood the rationale, at least conventionally, for having our military all over the world, unless it's, as we now know, part of a Luciferian agenda, and rogue elements of our government have joined forces with the Luciferians to try to do things that are not in our best interest, and to topple other nations and be engaged in color revolutions and things like that. So who knows? Any other questions? Thanks for that question, by the way. Any other questions or comments before we wrap up tonight? Don't want to cut anybody off. This is your chance to speak with Bill, or share anything you want with him, or ask him a question. All right, let's go to Jackie.
Hello, am I unmuted?
We can hear you. Yes.
Oh, great. Well, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. I'm so grateful for you doing this Zoom for all of us that are very interested in these topics and the signs of the times. And hello, Bill. I've met you a couple times at the conference, and you, JB, at the last conference in Norman, Oklahoma. One of the questions I have is, as Christians and evangelicals, we understand what you're saying. There are Luciferian entities at play here. There's a whole agenda. We don't understand all the workings. Netanyahu may be of that ilk. But how can we as Christians who love Israel, who love the Jewish people, who want to, pray that they receive Yeshua as Messiah, how can we best support Israel? Are there ministries? Which ones do you think are good ministries that we can participate in right now while there's such a great need?
Bill, I'll let you go first.
Well, obviously pray for them. I mean, that's the starting point right there. They're Jews for Jesus. I recommend them in some cases for praying and helping. I don't really have a lot of relationships with Jewish ministries over there, so I don't have a lot of other ones to give you. JB, do you have ministries?
Yeah, Friends of Israel for sure is at the top of my list. And Rennie Showers and Mike Stallard and others, just a great group. There are a lot of good ones out there. I think we know God has a plan for national Israel, for future national Israel. We also know that their leaders there are not operating from a standpoint of belief and from a biblical worldview, much the same way that Israel's leaders in biblical history sometimes were not godly and so forth, but they're still an ally, and we know God has a future for them, and we want to protect them, and we want to pray for them. We hope that they come to faith in Christ, and many of them are. There are certainly plenty of Messianic Jews at this point, but the vast majority, particularly in leadership, are not. And so I think, pray for them. I would be, careful to, not just send money to a lot of these causes, because there are a lot of opportunistic groups that have popped up since October 7th. And unless you can vouch for them through someone like Bill or myself or other prophecy leaders, I wouldn't assume the best. But another one that my wife reminded me of is Randy Price. He does a lot of work over in Israel World of the Bible Ministries. He would be a good one. There's several that are on the tip of my tongue, but yeah, those are.
Did you see Matt Hawks?
Oh, what did he say? Oh yeah, Olivier Melnick, another great one. Thanks, Matt.
Chosen People Ministries.
Chosen People, that's the one that was on the tip of my tongue. Thank you for that. So
Mhm.
these are all reputable dispensational groups that you kind of see on the circuit with, these prophecy conferences. And if the Lord puts it on your heart to support one of them, I certainly would follow the Spirit's leading there. But mostly it's just a matter of keeping it in balance. I think one of the things that we've seen is extremes where for some people, ever since October 7th, Israel can do no wrong. They're absolutely perfect. We've got to just, give them every benefit of the doubt, talking about the leadership. And
Mhm.
and then you've got the other extreme that says, no, Israel's engaged in genocide and they're, killing innocent people. Well, neither of those are true. I think we just need to have a balanced view that Israel is the good guy, Hamas is the bad guy. We want to kill the bad guy. Not, there is no such thing as a Hamas civilian. Let's be clear about that, right?
Right.
Right. You've got Hamas. If you're Hamas, you're an evil terrorist and you need to be killed. But if you're Israel, you're a nation and you want to in the war, there are other casualties. There's collateral damage. I mentioned earlier today on an interview that I did that, there's a difference between collateral damage, which happens in any war and is tragic, and collateral murder. And, Hamas is engaged in collateral murder. They want to rape and pillage and kill and torture innocent people. I don't think Israel, even its unbelieving leaders now, are necessarily trying to do that. There may be hidden agendas and there may be rogue elements of Israel's government in the same way that there are rogue elements of the United States government that are doing things that are part of a broader globalist agenda. Certainly Netanyahu was working hand in glove with Klaus Schwab and the pharmaceutical companies, Pfizer and so forth. So we get that, we understand that, but that stuff can be sorted out over time. Right now, Israel's under attack, and we want to do all we can to support them and help them protect themselves.
Right.
So,
Thank you.
all right. Thank you. All right, let's go. We'll do one more question here, and then we'll wrap up because I want to respect Bill's time. But let's go to Linda. Linda, if you can unmute. There we go.
Okay. My question is, I'm understanding all of these things here, but what I don't understand now is this college students and all of them meeting and they're all standing with the Palestinians, basically Hamas, which started all of this over in Israel, and I don't understand why can't they see? Are they being taught this in these schools? I know there's a lot of liberal schools that they're in, but you see all of these with all of their big signs and everything, and they're not standing with Israel at all. I mean, Israel didn't start this whole thing.
No,
and I don't understand.
Yeah, that's a great question, Lyndon. I'm glad you brought that up. So I'll give you my 2 cents worth, and then Bill may want to add something. But first of all, I ran into that too over the holidays, talking to millennials and other young people that talk about, the genocide that Israel's doing, which none of that is true. I think there's several reasons that we're seeing that. Number one, the Luciferians control the media. So they're controlling the narrative and they're perpetuating that narrative, not just through, kind of the old school media, but also through social media and especially through social media. So I think that's part of it. Same thing with the schooling institutions, both higher education as well as the compulsory government schooling at the high school level. I think that agenda is being driven home. And then we also cannot discount the presence of provocateurs and paid COINTELPRO agents that the Luciferians have used for years, not only in America, but also overseas. You could think about things like Operation Gladio over there in Europe. So it's not at all uncommon for, a lot of these people that are speaking out to be simply paid provocateurs trying to gin up this mindset among the anti-Semitic crowd. So I think there are a lot of reasons for it. But remember, the remnant principle, whatever, is in the majority typically is not, on the side of what's right. I mean, we see this all the way through Scripture. I mean, it was a minority of people that got on the ark, and it's a minority of people throughout history that have been on the Lord's side. So it's discouraging, especially knowing that the minds of our young people are being captured like that, but it shouldn't be surprising. So does that help?
Yes, yes, it does. I just found it hard to believe that there were so many of them that, go along with this. It just seems to me, it
Yeah.
just amazes me, that deception.
Well, and I would encourage you guys to listen to or watch either one, the video that I did with Brandon Holdhouse and Tom this morning, because they're there, and I think, I don't remember if it was Tom or Brandon, but pointed out that, look, don't listen to this propaganda that you're hearing. We're here. They talk to family members of hostages, of current hostages. They talk to family members and eyewitnesses that lost loved ones on October 7th. So, I trust these guys, obviously, Tom and Brandon, salt of the earth guys. And so, you've got to just tune out the propaganda and look at the facts of the matter. So, thank you, Linda. We've got a couple more here that in the chat. Someone asked, what do you think of Christians United for Israel? I'm not familiar with that group. Are you, Bill?
A little bit. It's put together. John Hagee sort of leads it. They're a good cause overall. Some people call John Hagee. They say he's got dual covenant theology or something like that, where they think the Jews can be saved independently from Jesus. But he's some people said we counted on that. But overall, I think they do good things for Israel.
Yeah, I agree. I've got some issues with some of Hagee's viewpoint, but yeah, I mean, I think the motive is good, and I take your word for it on that one. And then Penelope asked, do you think God has given those over to their evil heart already, or is that yet to come? I mean, I think we're seeing it's a process. I think we are seeing seared consciences and hard-hearted, people. I think it's going to get worse. What do you think, Bill?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to get better. Basically, we said goodbye to God back in the 60s, even affecting our children. We had the Supreme Court case of Engel versus Vitale in 1962. They removed prayer out of public schools. 1963, Abington School District versus Shemp removed Bible reading out of the public schools. And so what we've done right now, God right now is abandoned this country, and we're going through the 3 stages of abandonment, wrath, which you find in Romans 1:24, 1:26, and 1:28, which basically 1:24 says he gives us over to the lusts of the flesh, that's sexual perversion. Romans 1:26 says he's given over to vile passions, that's homosexuality. And Romans 1:28 says he gives us over to a debased mind, that's moral decadence. And the Greek word is paradidiomi. And basically what it sounds like is when you let a wild dog go off its leash and you don't train it, it goes wild, it does whatever it wants, it hooks up with other bad packs of dogs. And it's that kind of an issue. I think that's pretty much happened. We've said goodbye to God. Now we're seeing the schools are woke. Anti-Semitism is on the rise. And I don't see it getting any better.
Yeah, I don't either. Well, listen, Bill, thank you very much.